Hello everybody, welcome to Dude with a Fork. My name is Ken. On today's episode of Ken Cooks Stuff, I'm actually making an ingredient. I am making caramelized onions. Now, I love onions in all of their forms, especially raw, on burgers and in tacos and things like that, and they make a great ingredient in a lot of other things. But when you caramelize them, in other words, when you cook them to the point where the sugars in them actually start to break down and turn into caramel, they become something completely different. They're not like regular onions at all. They add a huge amount of flavor to whatever you put them in. That harsh onion flavor that some people are very, very sensitive to gets cooked out of it, basically. It's a whole new thing. So it takes a lot of time, and you have to chop a lot of onions because onions are mostly water. And what we are doing is essentially cooking all of that water out. So I recommend this if you've never done it before. It's fun to do as an experiment. Get yourself a big bag of onions when they go on sale and try it. So let's get started. Okay, so let's chop some onions. I have here my biggest cutting board because you want to give yourself plenty of space. I have a bowl to put the onions in. I just hit it with my knife, which I just sharpened. This is an 8-inch chef's knife. 8, yes. I need to get a 10-inch. The bigger the knife, the better. If you find yourself struggling to cut things up, sometimes it's because your knife is either too dull or it's too small. So I also have onions, lots and lots of onions. And I have a bench scraper because you never want to do this with your knife and use the blade edge to scrape things up. So here's one kind of bench scraper. It's metal. It's not sharp, but it's got a nice keen edge on it. This kind is really good if you're cutting up meat because this will really get the fat and everything off the board. If you're just chopping up vegetables, then this kind of rubberized kind, I've had this for years. It came free with something, Callaware pot and pan scraper. It's got a curved edge to get through bowls and stuff, and I just use it as a bench scraper. You don't need to buy this. If you have a coffee can lid, you can just cut one edge off the coffee can and there you are. So let's start with some onions. So like I said, I have lots and lots of onions here. There are two parts to an onion. This is the stem end. This is the part that comes out of the ground. This is the root end. This is the only part I'm not going to keep. Everything else that's on here I'm going to keep to put in vegetable and or chicken stock, or beef stock, or pork stock, whatever you want. But I'm going to cut that little end off right there very carefully. Okay. He goes. And you end up with a lot of little bits of the skin here. I'm just going to brush them off to the side. See? That goes in a bowl. I'm going to cut this end off. And if you want to, I mean, you can save that, but I'm going to use that in stock. So I have a bowl here that I'm putting all of that in. Really, it makes too much noise, so I get a napkin under it. All right, so now we have a flat end here. I'm going to flip this up. And I'm just going to save myself some trouble here, and I probably should have done this in the first place, is lift all that loose skin off it. Okay, so now I have the root end facing up. I have a nice flat surface. This is stable now. So I'm going to keep my fingers to one side of the blade, and I'm going to slice directly through that root. All right, and this gives me 2 halves. Okay, and so then I can just take this half and peel off all the skin. And usually I take this outer layer off as well. It's dried out a little bit. It's usually a little tougher. And it just works better in stock. So okay, now I'm going to take this side and do the same thing over here. And I'm going to get all these bits up here, put them in my bowl. All right, so now we have two halves. Just going to wipe off my blade here. 2 halves, and if you want, you can quarter this if you don't have a big enough blade. Okay, so you're just going to rock Okay, I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. See how this blade, a chef's blade has a curved section and it has a straight section. This curved section acts as a hinge. All right. Okay. And that just lets you slice through things, and it's taking me a while because I'm doing this, usually I should do it like this. I'm doing it at a 90-degree angle to how I normally would do it. Now, if your onion is too big, you're not going to be able to get your blade up if you have a short knife. So that's part of the reason why we like to have as long a knife as possible. Now, I don't need these this big because we're just going to caramelize these onions. So I am going to actually make my life a little bit easier and cut this one in fourths. Okay. And I can lay it down here. Okay. And check when you get to the end here, you may have a little bit of that root section in there still, and I'm just going to cut that out and put it in with my stock. Okay. So I'm going to try to find the smallest side here to cut. Okay. And bench scraper all of this into our bowl. Now these are big onions. That's why I'm using a very as big a knife as I possibly can. You know, you can cut this down. You could have cut this in thirds as well, but I like to have this little root end here holding everything together. That makes life a lot easier. So, and I'm just going to push the onion forward as I go. And this is an older knife. It's a Chicago cutlery one. I've had it for a while, and it does a good job. Keep it sharp. I sharpen it all the time. There's that little root end again. Keep your fingers out of the way. You know, if you're just learning how to cut stuff up with a good knife, you know, go slow. Go slow until you're comfortable with it. That's fine. I'm not real concerned with getting things super uniform because this is all going to cook down like you would not believe. So, bench scraper, pick all these bits up. I mean, you can see I've got a lot of little bits here at the end. That's just fine, okay? All right, so onion number 2. Again, cut that root end off and get him out of here. Cut the stem end off. Cut them in half. Get that outer layer of skin off. And even though these onions have been refrigerated, which is a good way to keep them from getting up in your eyes, they're starting to affect me. So these are nice strong onions. These are going to be terrific. So I'm going to show you just one more time. I'm going to use this side. This side's a little smaller. So again, just going to quarter it. I'm going to do this at an angle here. Okay. Just use the knife as a hinge. And notice too, I'm sliding the knife along a little bit. If you've ever had this thing where you're chopping up vegetables, green peppers are especially prone to this, and then they're all stuck together on the bottom, that's because you're not sliding that knife along. You need to let that knife act as a knife and cut. Now that I'm like this, kind of difficult to cut this way because this is so high. So I can just turn it on its side and cut that way, and then cut this root end off, and we're done with it. So again, same thing, cut, 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 cut. And then when it gets too small, I can just start doing this and then just cut that off. There we have it. I'm going to get the rest of these cut up and I'll meet you at the stove. All right, so we're over here at the stove. I have my 12-inch ceramic lined pan heating up over medium heat. It's hot, and the way I can tell it's hot is I just put a little bit of water on my hands and, okay, see, then you know it's hot. You could also use a thermometer if you want, but so I'm going to go in with just a little bit of oil here. We're not going to need a ton because these things are not going to stick terribly. And I actually had to use 2 containers to bring all these over here. So I'm going to put some of these in. And I'm going to turn up the pan just a little bit because the minute you add this, it really cools off the pan. Okay. And these don't worry that these are stuck together like this. Everything's eventually going to break apart here. So let's get the other container in here. And let's get the rest of that in there. And I know you're thinking, that's a lot of onions. Okay, you will be amazed at how much this cooks down. Now I want to really accelerate things here. So I'm going to use about half a cup of water. I'm going to throw half a cup of water in there, and then I'm going to put a lid on it. And I want these to steam a little bit because obviously the only ones cooking are the ones that are down on the bottom. I want to cook all of them, so I'm going to add a little bit of water and steam it, and come back in about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll take a look at it. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes. I came in and stirred these once, and so you can see now that everything is softened. There's still some of that liquid in the bottom. From this point on, it is going to be lids off completely, and I'm running this over medium heat. We don't want this to take forever. You can supposedly do this in the slow cooker. I've got plenty of onions, so I may try that next week, and we'll just see how it goes. It takes like 12 hours though, so it helps probably to peel and chop your onions the night before, and then throw them in the slow cooker first thing in the morning. We'll see how that works. This liquid in the bottom means that we're not going to get a fond at all for right now until all of that cooks off. So when that does though, you have to start looking for browning because you're going to get browning on the bottom of this pan, which is what we want. The problem is if you get too much, it can burn. So I always keep a little cup of water handy to deglaze the pan if I'm afraid that something's going to burn. You can use white wine if you want. Nothing wrong with that. I just haven't opened a bottle yet. You may notice here and there you see a little tan speck, and that's probably a little piece of the onion peel. You don't have to work super hard to get all of those out if you see a little bit here and there. The onion peel is perfectly edible. It's not going to hurt anything at all if you get a bit of that onion skin in there. I mean, I know it's the internet, so somebody somewhere is going to say, well, you know, my dad's cousin's mailman's dog walker's next door neighbor ate a bit of the onion peel once, and he turned into a newt. And all I can say is it's an odd world out there. So I'm going to keep an eye on these. For the most part, these cook very hands-off. I'm only stirring these because I need something to do while I'm standing here talking. So I'm going to let these go. I'll come back and check on them every 10 to 15 minutes. If you are at all like me, you should set yourself a timer for 10 to 15 minutes, or next thing you know, you will have forgotten all about these because you'll get involved with something else. So I'll come back every 10 to 15 minutes. I'll turn the camera back on and we'll check back in when things start to change. See you then. So here we are after 10 minutes, and I am getting some caramelization in the bottom there, which is nice. That only happens because the water has evaporated out of there. So I'm going to stir these around a little bit, and as you can see, I don't need to add any onions because the onions, I don't need to add any water because the onions on top still have moisture that they will naturally use to deglaze the pan with. And I was doing some other things in the kitchen. I mean, this literally was 10 minutes later. I did set a timer. And when that initial water that I added finally cooked out, you could tell because the sound that these things were making as they sat here cooking on the stove suddenly changed. It became a higher pitched, crispy sound. A couple of things I should add, I think that I didn't mention before. These are not sweet onions by any means. These are just standard yellow onions. I ended up with 3 of them in here, and you can see already how much they are cooking down. I'm going to keep an eye on these little bit more closely. I'm chopping some vegetables for another recipe I'm going to make here in a little bit. But I'm not using sweet onions. I'm not using Vidalia onions. There's no need for that. We are caramelizing the sugars in these onions, and these will become naturally sweet by the time this is all done. And I'm not adding any salt at all. Some people add salt. I don't feel the need to. This is mainly going to go as a flavoring ingredient in other things, and there will be salt there. And also, some people add brown sugar at the end because they're trying to rush things along, and I'm not doing that. Really, the only three ingredients that we have in here are onions, that initial amount of oil I used to start with, and I'm going to throw a knob of butter in there at the end. So I'm going to let these go for another 10 minutes, and we'll come back. I'll keep stirring as I'm chopping things up here, and we'll see where we are in 10 minutes. Okay, another 10 minutes are up, and you can see lots of browning on the bottom there. And we're just going to stir this. And I might actually add just a little bit of water this time just to help get some of that up. You won't need it as much at first, but you'll find it helps toward the end. And I think an Amazon package just arrived for me because I heard my doorbell. But as you can see, we're starting to get a nice mahogany color going on these things. So they are looking beautiful. They are smelling absolutely amazing too. So I will let these go probably 5 minutes this time, and then we'll check back in. So they do like to stick to this. So anyway, we'll be back. All right, it's been another 5 minutes, and you are probably looking at this and you're thinking one of two things. Either I've got some burnt onions on my hands, which I guarantee you I don't. If you've ever burnt onions, you know that scent. It is a strong odor. You know it. Or you're thinking, well, those things are done. And they are. I mean, if you wanted to plop these things down on top of a burger or a steak, you could do just that. But I'm going to take these a little bit further than where they are. I got all this flavor around on the side here, and I do not want to miss any of that. So I'm going to deglaze the sides here with these onions. So don't miss any opportunity to get some of that flavor up. So I'm going to let these go about another 10 minutes, and we'll see where they are. I've done this before, and you would be amazed. You would be amazed at what you can end up with when you really take these to the limit. So I will be back in about 10 minutes and show you what we've got. They like to stick to that. Okay, so here we are another 10 minutes later. I have not left the stove really. You can see I have cooked a lot of the moisture out of these. I have some nice fond down here, and there's barely enough moisture at this point in these onions left to deglaze this pan. Yeah, there's a little bit. You can see it coming up, so it's not a problem to just go ahead and add just a smidge of water there, and you can see how that brings that fond up really well. I'll try over here. That's giving me an opportunity to show you again, so let's just add a little bit here, and it all comes up. And that is flavor, of course, and that goes into the onions. And these are about done. I'm going to cook them probably another 10 minutes or so. I'm trying to be careful here because you can take them not just over the top, but over the edge as well, and you don't want to do that. You know, if you want to stop at this point, that's fine. You don't need to get them this brown, but really this would be the basis of a really, really good French onion soup. In fact, if I were going to do that, I would cook them until there's almost nothing left in this pan. But I'm going to take them down a little bit further. You know, do what it takes to give yourself a sense of control over the process. If you need to turn the heat down, that's fine. I did knock it down just a notch because I'm trying to do this in 10-minute intervals here. And if you need to add a little bit of water to the pan, that's fine too. They do stick, but a butter knife butter knife is your best friend at this point. So really what I need to do is get one of these that's got a straight edge like this, but none of these notches. So next time I'm out and about and I see something like that, I'm going to grab that, and you'll start to see that show up in these videos. And again, you can see here, getting some nice foundation here, and I will probably add some water as I go, and I'll come back in another 10 minutes and show you where we are. All right, it has been about 8 minutes. I have been going in and adding water as necessary. You can see there's not much left, and you're thinking, wow, these are burnt. No, they're not. They're a beautiful brown color. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the stove, and I'm going to deglaze this a little bit here. I've got one last step to do after this. I've also been trying to break them up a little bit with the end of the spoon here. I could have chopped them a little more finely at the beginning, but that's okay. So I've got a spoon, and I've got a big knob of butter that I'm going to add in there. And we're just going to let that melt. And there is some water in butter, and I probably could have let that deglaze the pan as well. But there you are. Now this started out with a pan full of onions, and now there is barely anything left. I'm letting the residual heat. I hate how this stove, things bounce on this burner here, so I am letting the residual heat from the pan melt that butter, and going in and getting some of that fond off the side there. So I do not want to waste any flavor. And really what this is now, this is concentrated onion flavor. If you have something that needs some flavor because of the way it's going to cook, you can use this, and I will show you how. I'm going to actually put this, I'm going to let this cool, and then I have some little ice cube containers. I'm going to put this in there and let it freeze, and then take them out. And when I have something like, I'm going to make some soup in the slow cooker or in the Instant Pot, I'm going to throw one of these in at the beginning, and it will add a ton of flavor. So that's it. It really is a lot of chopping of onions, and then hanging out intermittently at the stove for about 30-40 minutes, and then paying a really good, really close attention to it right at the end. So there are some beautiful caramelized onions, and I will get these frozen up and cubed up and show you what that looks like. See you in a bit. So here's what our onions look like when they've come out of the freezer. I've got this little silicone ice cube tray, and these should pop right out, and they do, and that's what we have. A cube-ish kind of thing of beautifully caramelized onions. And they do smell, even frozen, they smell really wonderful. So I have here one of these Ziploc, well, not Ziploc, it's Food Saver brand actually, zippered freezer bags with the little seal here that are reusable. So I'm going to get these guys in here and vacuum seal it and show you what that looks like. All right, and this is what they look like. They've been vacuum sealed. This is a zipper bag, so anytime I want to use one of these, and I don't need to write what's on here because I know what these are, and I'm not going to worry about the date. I'm going to use about 1 or 2 of these a week. I have 11, so it's going to last me 2 months, maybe 3 months. So anytime I want one, just open the seal, grab one, there we go. Zip the bag back up, hit the seal, and we're good to go. And that's it. Pretty easy, right? And that's it, folks. Takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth the effort. And then you've got frozen caramelized onions in the freezer that you can add to gravies, you can add to sauces, you can put in with your beans when you're cooking beans. You'll find all sorts of uses for them. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please go ahead and click on the like button. If you like the kind of content that you're seeing, please subscribe. And if you hit the bell icon, you will get notifications when I put up a new video, which is hopefully going to be on a more regular basis going forward. If you have any questions or if you like what you see, you can also feel free to add a comment. I do try to respond to comments fairly quickly. So again, thanks for watching. Stay safe, eat some great food, and power to the proletariat. See you next time.